Are you going to go over the lunch specials too? 220?
Just the shepherd's pie.
Shepherd's pie sounds great.
About more.
Oh, over.
Not so easy.
Salmon burger too. Sounds good. Pumpkin on this.
I really like these here.
Yeah, it's really good.
I had a lot of them. It's a good video. I guess I'm. Oh.
This is Dean's photo. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, sir.
You got the middle spot here.
Seat over there? Okay.
No, I haven't. We got fresh water right here.
And I'm not a tea drinker, so I'm someone feel free.
It's actually
Pints of politics.
Yeah, this is actually a pint of fresh water for you if you'd like that.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, ready?
Yes.
Welcome back here on Hampshire Now, 1-9-1450, ConcordNewsRadio.com. I'm Chris Ryan. Thanks for joining us for Pints and Politics here at the Barley House, fueled by the Smutty Nose Brewing Company. I'm going to be joined right now on the program by Dr. Ben Carson, conservative thought leader, an individual who has risen to great prominence within the political system, despite the fact he has never achieved elective office, a best-selling author, an individual who has the respect of Republican primary voters across the country. Dr. Carson, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate you joining us for the program, and we'll start off with, where you see your campaign right now. As I mentioned, this is the first time you've done something like this, and a presidential campaign is expansive,
Sure.
it's difficult. You've had ups and downs in terms of the process aspect of things, developing a staff. Where do you see your campaign? What have been the challenges of being a first-time presidential candidate, first-time candidate for office?
Well, actually, things have gone amazingly well. We've quickly acquired extremely talented people. A few weeks ago, the Washington Post said our candidacy was in turmoil, which is just a total, complete, utter lie. And the people that they said who had left, contacted them, said, there's a reason that we left so that we can do another part of the thing. Why don't you tell that story? And no, their narrative wants to be that we're having difficulty. They said we'd never be able to raise money, but obviously the money is coming in, over 150,000 unique donors, over 200,000 donations. We have plenty of money to take care of our problems. So I see our candidacy as a juggernaut. It's just moving extremely rapidly, extremely well. We're in the top tier in virtually every poll. And people are waking up across the nation. That's what's so cool. Everywhere we go, red states, blue states, north, south, east, west, very large, enthusiastic crowds, but people who are learning to think for themselves, rather than have some political pundit tell you what you're supposed to think. This is the accepted way of doing things, they tell you. These are the accepted candidates. The problem is the accepted candidates have got us into all this problem. And it's time for us to actually solve these problems. And it's time for us to return the people to the pinnacle of power in this country rather than government.
I think that a lot of people share that view, and I think that a lot of individuals feel that politicians got us into the mess. But taking the step of voting for or supporting an individual who does not have any elected experience, to borrow from what you do, it would be essentially like me going into the operating room and saying, hey, I know a lot about this, and I have good ideas. But
actually,
go ahead.
Actually, it wouldn't be, because I could take a smart person off the street here, and I could give them a year of training in politics, and they could do a pretty good job.
But could they be president of the United States?
I give them a year of training in neurosurgery, and they would know nothing. And really what you need in order to lead a country like this, because our country was designed for citizen leaders, for statesmen, not for permanent class politicians. And what you really need to know is how our nation is supposed to work. What you need to know is how the Constitution works, not what all the intricacies of the inefficient system is that we have now with all the different liaisons, with special interest groups. I don't need to know that. I don't want to know that, quite frankly. I want to know how it's supposed to work and want to get it back to that. Now, I realize you do need to know, have people around you who've been into the mire and knows how that stuff goes and knows the history of it. I do recognize that. But the Bible says in the multitude of counselors is safety. But the key thing is you've got to have a vision, because the Bible also says without a vision the people perish. And we're in the process of perishing right now as we throw away all of our values and principles for the sake of political correctness.
So the key in your view is having individuals around you who know how to play the game, but for you to have, the wherewithal to know as an individual citizen, and to be able to put and the constitutional knowledge to be able to push forth that actual role. What are the examples of individuals who you'd like to have around you, and how would you construct an administration? What would be the types of individuals that you would want around you? Not just naming people in particular, but how would you go about putting together an administration?
I want people who have a great deal of experience. For instance, there are generals that I talk to on a regular basis who have a great deal of knowledge about what's been going on in the Middle East, a great deal of knowledge about Eastern Europe and what's been going on there. And we've had a lot of in-depth conversations, which has brought me up to speed tremendously on what's going on in the world. I always thought I knew a lot, but there's a lot more. The more you know, the less you know.
Right. In life, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, do you finish? I didn't want to cut you off.
Well, no, I'm also going to say, in terms of economics, in terms of business, I think we need to run our government more like a business. And, I've had decades of experience on corporate boards and learning how both national and international business works. But I've also come to know that there are people who are total geniuses in that area. Those are the kind of people that I want advising me on economic policy, as opposed to, a lot of people who have no real experience in the world. They may be a university professor and have lived in an ivory tower, but they don't know how the real world works.
Dr. Carson, I think what Chris is alluding to is the idea that it's been decades since we've had somebody with no political experience win the presidency, and so since I can't,
those individuals were generals.
Yes, and so I can't look at your record as governor and see how you interacted with the state legislature or in Congress. So maybe at least you can give us a little bit of a glimpse of your philosophy, kind of on the ground. How would you deal with Congress and the possibility you may at some point have a chamber controlled by the other party? Kind of what's your sort of philosophy as an executive?
Well, first of all, I would say that just because you don't have government experience doesn't mean you don't have experience. I have spent many decades as a neurosurgeon solving very complex problems, some of which have never been solved by anybody in the history of the world. That takes a lot of know-how, and to be able to put the teams together to do that. Like I said, I've had decades of experience in the corporate world. My wife and I started a national nonprofit, the Carson Scholars Fund. As you know, 9 out of 10 nonprofits fail. Ours is active in all 50 states, doing very well. Has won the Simon Award, which is only given to one nonprofit in the country out of thousands. Comes with a check for $250,000. The Ronald McDonald Charity Award, only one organization out of thousands has won that, another six-figure check, and others too. But we don't do it for the awards. We do it for the effect. Teachers have told us when we put a scholar in their classroom, the classroom improves. The GPA of the whole class goes up. So it's really more about knowing how to do things than it is having a long political pedigree.
Sure, but what would be your philosophy? There are some presidents who they have an agenda and they want to push it through Congress. There are others who prefer to have kind of Congress sort of kick around some ideas and bring something to them. I mean, specifically now, your experience is a given, but specifically on Congress, sort of what is your philosophy on governing with that branch?
I think you have to lead. And, Congress, we've sent a lot of people to Congress in the last few elections who said the right things and seem to have the right philosophy. But as we see, Congress is largely a peanut gallery, which is watching what the Supreme Court does and watching what the executive branch does. And that's because the strong leadership has not been there. I think that can come from the executive office. Congress is really the only branch of government which has the ability to make law. And yet they've allowed that to be usurped by others. They do have the ability to pass laws to check anything that's been done by the executive branch or by the Supreme Court. And for instance, I would be encouraging them right now, if I was sitting in the executive office, to make sure that they pass laws that protect the religious liberty of American citizens. There is no American citizen who should have to lose their job or lose their business because of their faith. And Congress only has the ability to do that.
Jamie?
Dr. Carson, thanks for being here. Earlier at the intro of the show, we were discussing among the three of us who the Ben Carson voter is. And I was curious as to who you believe the Ben Carson voter is in this election.
Well, I can tell you, every place I go, I run into a lot of people who said, I've never voted before. I never got registered to vote before, and I'm voting for you. They don't know what category they belong in, except they belong in the category of an American, of somebody who understands that our country is going off the deep end, that we're giving away all of our values and principles for the sake of political correctness, that we're losing our vision of who we are. And so I think the Ben Carson voter are people who actually recognize that we're going to have to change course, and we can't just play around the edges. We're going to have to go to the heart of the matter here.
In the next segment of the show, we'll talk about some of the issues that are significant here in New Hampshire, where you stand on those and get a feel for what that agenda would be as President of the United States. But in concluding this first segment of the show, Dr. Ben Carson here at Pints of Politics at the Barley House, I wanted you to tell us a little about yourself. And obviously everybody knows the political aspect of things. They see you on Fox, they've read the books. But outside of what the public persona is of Ben Carson, what would you want to share with individuals about who you are as a person?
Well, as a person, I'm someone who went into medicine because as an 8-year-old, I was inspired by mission stories. These missionary doctors who traveled all over the world at great personal expense to bring not only physical but mental and spiritual healing to people. And they seem like the most noble people on the face of the earth. Later on, as a teenager, I decided I'd rather be rich. So at that point, I said, I think I'll be a psychiatrist. And then later on, I said, well, what are you really good at? And I started analyzing my life, and I realized I had a lot of eye-hand coordination, the ability to think in 3 dimensions. I was a very careful person, never knocked things over and said, oops, which is a great characteristic for brain surgeons. So, all of those things made me decide that maybe that was where I should go.
You left that out of the application.
And a lot of people thought it was strange because at the time I decided that, there were 8 black neurosurgeons, or had ever been 8 black neurosurgeons in the history of the world. But that didn't bother me at all because I said, this is where your talent is, and that's where you have to go. And I'm a person who believes you sort of go through the doors that are open based on the talents that you have. And my plan was to relax after a very arduous neurosurgical career, 15,000 operations, and have a traditional retirement. But, doors began to open. People began to clamor for me to do this. I really thought it would all die down, but it never did. Instead, it continued to build up. And as I had a chance to talk to Americans across this country and see how helpless they felt and how they were hurting. And, I do realize that I've been given, a certain talent for solving problems. And I also am going to utilize the talents of a lot of people around me to get those problems solved, because that's one of the strengths of America.
That's Dr. Ben Carson here. It's Pints of Politics here at the Barley House, 109-1450 and ConcordNewsRadio.com. Pints of Politics fueled by the Smutty Nose Brewing Company. We'll come back, talk some issues with Senator Carson after. Talk some issues with Dr. Carson after this.
Sorry, we can edit.
We can edit out all my mistakes. All right, here we go with the second segment. Welcome back here at Pints of Politics at the Barley House, 109-1450 and ConcordNewsRadio.com. Pints of Politics fueled by the Smutty Nose Brewing Company. Dr. Ben Carson, a renowned neurosurgeon, joins us here for the program. And I'm interested, you brought this up previous in talking about religious equality. And we're at a time in our nation where, we just celebrated the 4th of July, and this is a country that was, in my view, founded upon freedom for all individuals to pursue their life, their lifestyles, and to do so without government intervention. I'm curious as to your thoughts as to where we sit right now here in 2015 in regards to racial equality, equality in regards to immigrants, illegal or non-legal immigrants, religious equality, and sexual equality. Where do you think this nation sits, and where would it be under your presidency?
Well, I think we've made tremendous progress up until recently. I believe the purveyors of division have done a masterful job in terms of making the American people into each other's enemies, creating a non-existent war on women, using every incident that involves people of two different races to stoke the fires of racial division, class warfare, always keeping that on the front burner, religious intolerance, and even creating wedges between people of different generations. That's going to require the right kind of leadership. Now, admittedly, our president currently was a community organizer. What do community organizers do? We got to get ours, it's us against them. That's what they do. So none of that should be surprising to us. But, that's not who we are as a nation. Our strength has always been in our unity. And I would be someone who really emphasized what we have in common rather than what we have apart. It's okay for people to disagree about things. That doesn't make them enemies. We need to learn how to have intelligent discussions, put things on the table. A lot of times you'll discover that you're not as far apart as you think you are.